Tuesday, February the 22nd, you should be reading today Leviticus chapter 12 through 14. You should be reading Psalm 111 and Hebrews chapter 5. And if you open up the book of Leviticus, we've been talking about this almost every day because we understand and we get it. This book is not easy to read. But we hope that you buckle up, you get into God's word, and you learn some really cool things from what God is trying to teach us through his Old Testament people, the Israelites. So God has gathered his people to the mountain, Mount Sinai, and he's trying to tell them about what it looks like to live differently than they lived previous in their life in Egypt. And he's called out these people from within his people. He's called a specific family group, the Levite tribe, to say, you're going to be the priests of my people, the go-betweens, me and the people, helping them love and worship me. And he has some rules about what it looks like to be in his proximity, what it looks like for those Levites to be so close to serving in the tabernacle space to him. And then the chapters we read today, there's some more rules we read about. And it says in chapter 11, is the previous chapter from yesterday, chapter 11 talks about what is clean or unclean food, or pure or impure food to eat. What does it look like? In chapter 12, purifications for childbirth. What does it look like after you give birth to a kid? How does that look like for you and your spouse and everybody around you to be clean in the presence of a holy God? Chapter 13, what do you do with dealing with skin diseases? God gets very picky about this stuff. He talks about regulations for if you have molds and like what if happens if your pots and your clothes and the things you sleep on, what if they get moldy? What do you do about this? Chapter 14 talks about skin diseases and what do you do about skin diseases and cleansing of other things like that. And then you get to that point, you're like, why does it matter? Why does it matter? And it kind of can get weird, right? Because some of the mold stuff, he talks about taking the clay pots and dashing them and breaking them, getting rid of them and do something completely different. And it matters because God's people had been living a previous life for over 400 years in the land of Egypt, a land that did care about cleanliness. They cared about how they looked on the outside. But it wasn't really to benefit the gods that they worshiped. It was really for their own self-pleasure. And God was wanting to distinguish his people from the Egyptians. There's some cleanliness things that are just good for you to do. How you eat, what you put in your body actually just helps you live a better life. How you take care of your body, all these things help you. But all of it comes back to you are in the presence of a holy God. And because of that, there are ways that you need to live in his presence so that way you can be with him. And you can read through these and you're like, man, if I ever give birth to a child, I can't be clean. I need to just pause for a second and say, that's not what these chapters are actually talking about. Because God designed childbirth. God designed us to have families and to grow. So these are not bad things. What's happening is God is giving us a way to recognize for a moment we are ritually impure. If you have given birth to a child or you're around somebody who gave birth to a child, his people, because you were associated with blood and all the other stuff that happens in childbirth, you were ritually unclean, but he gives you a way to be clean again. You wash, you bathe, and all of a sudden, and after a day period, you can be clean again. You don't have to be unclean forever. Ritual stuff is all about your outside may be dirty, but your inside can stay clean, and there's just a period you have to go through before you can come back into the presence of God. Because he wants to remind them, just like he wants to remind you and me, that how they live their lives is important. Jesus says later on in life that it's not what it comes on the inside that makes you impure, right? He talks about food, like what you eat. That's not what makes you impure or pure. What comes out of your heart does, right? But God understands that your life, my life, are reflections of him and his glory here on earth. And he wants us to live pure, clean lives so that when other people see us, they see the holiness and amazingness of God. So when you read through these, remind yourself God's not being mean and saying that, man, everything I do makes me unclean. He's actually giving you a way that, yes, you are unclean, but you can be made clean. And he actually did that for us through Jesus too. In the Old Testament, you had to do certain rites and rituals and washings to be made clean. In the New Testament, Jesus says he's the one who makes you clean. He's the one who washes away your sin. He's the one that makes you pure enough to stand before a holy God. As you're watching this, you and me and our neighbors and everybody around us needs to know the price that God paid for them through his Son, for us all to be made clean, for us all to be able to enter into his presence. And as hard as it is to read through this stuff, it's great reminders of I'm glad I don't have to do all these things anymore. I'm glad that Jesus came to complete the law, that everything is fulfilled in Jesus and that he alone makes me clean. I don't have to offer sacrifices. I don't have to go to the temple daily to confess my sins and say, man, I'm doing this thing wrong. I can run to Jesus to be made clean. If you're struggling today, as you're reading through this and you're recognizing, man, I'm just being reminded of the uncleanliness of my life, my heart, my thoughts, my actions, my everything, message us. We would love to walk with you through this, learning how to surrender your everything to Jesus so you can be made clean. Church, until we see each other again, you are sent.